Guys, welcome to Koi Academy. Guys, in this video we'll be talking about the difference between the absorption costing and variable costing. Costing is also called marginal costing. So the prime difference is, if you see on the right hand side where variable costing is written, you can see that the product cost constitutes direct material, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. Okay, so these are the three costs which go into the cost of the product or inventory. Okay, whenever you see inventory like $100 in a balance sheet or anywhere, just keep in mind that it consists of direct material, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. Only the variable part of the manufacturing overhead. This is the case when we are applying variable costing. Okay, whereas when you talk about absorption costing, what goes into that inventory valuation. Okay, now let's suppose that you see $100 as inventory in a balance sheet, but let's suppose that you're using absorption costing. Now that $100 would include direct materials, direct labor, variable manufacturing overhead, plus fixed manufacturing overhead. So the difference between variable and absorption costing is that in variable costing, fixed manufacturing overheads are not included, whereas in absorption costing, we absorb the fixed manufacturing overhead in the cost of the product. Okay, so moving on, in variable costing, fixed manufacturing overheads are part of the period cost. Okay, let's suppose that in the month of February, you made 100 units. Okay, so if you're taking variable costing approach, then and you made 100 units, and you incurred $100 of factory rent, let's suppose. So that 100 units would include the cost of direct material, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. Okay, they will not include the cost of factory rent. Okay, because that factory rent is a fixed manufacturing overhead and not a variable overhead. So that would ultimately be subtracted, that is fixed manufacturing overhead will be subtracted at the end. Okay, in the variable costing method. Whereas if you're talking about the absorption costing, when you will calculate the cost of the units, you will also include that rent figure in the product cost, because that is rent is essentially a fixed manufacturing overhead. So in the variable costing, fixed manufacturing overheads and selling and admin expenses are part of the period cost. That is, you subtract them at the end of the year. You do not make those costs part of the product. And in absorption costing, all the costs are made part of the product except selling and admin expenses. Admin expenses are usually related to the office expenses, and selling expenses are like if you're giving commission to the salesperson. So these two expenses do not have any bearing on the cost of the product. So the selling and admin always go at the end, regardless of the process you are using, whether you are using absorption costing or variable costing. So the main difference between the absorption and variable costing is the treatment of fixed manufacturing overhead. Okay, in variable, you do not include fixed manufacturing overhead, whereas in absorption costing, you include fixed manufacturing overhead in the cost of the product. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe.